Mereruka was a nobleman who belongs to the 6th dynasty or kingdom, a very wealthy man, and that's why he is the owner of that tomb behind me. The tomb was constructed the tombs of his kings. You see two chambers, what are chambers of his family. Saqqara is an open book that tells the history of the ancient Egyptian civilization throughout its entire history, passing by all the stages, starting from the Old Kingdom and till the New Kingdom. Even the Greek-Roman period, that has lasted 900 years, has its share in Saqqara's monuments. The name of Saqqara is derived from the name of god Suker, the ancient god of the dead, in Memphis, which is the first capital of Egypt. El-Mastaba is that building that's constructed above the ground of the tomb, where underneath it are the collection of rooms dug in the ground for the burial and his funerary furniture. The style of El-Mastaba at first was simple. It was actually a sealed block with no space vacant inside it. That was during the first and second dynasties. A long time, that upper part of the tomb had chambers inside. In the 6th dynasty, the mastabas became more luxurious. The rooms got bigger, both in number and in size. Open courts were even added with rows of columns and paintings, and more free in their subjects. The tomb in Saqqara is the best example of a mastaba dynasty of the Old Kingdom. Mereruka was a nobleman who lived during the 6th dynasty during the reign of King Teti, who actually owns a pyramid right behind Mereruka's tomb. The step pyramid of King Zoser in Saqqara is where we found the noble's tomb close by, as a desire from them to be buried as possible to their kings, so that they may have a simple and fine life with them in the afterlife. So the northern part of the vast hill north to Zoser's pyramid is a special place dedicated to the burials of the high officials of the 3rd dynasty. The tomb of Mereruka comprises a court, 4 columns or a colonnade, and more than 30 chambers. On the walls of his tomb, he depicted the daily life he once lived, the thing that distinguishes the noble's tombs from the royal tombs, that has no such thing. The Nile and its marshes must come at first right after the entrance of the tomb, showing how important the Nile is for the life of the Egyptians. It's a funny scene of the mongoose stealing the chick from its nest, while its mother defends it angrily, while under the water that teems with a life of its own, the crocodile attacks the baby hippo, and the mother hippo revenges. Above is a regular scene of agriculture, with the owner of the tomb represented as the bigger character carved on the walls. The carpenters are working too, making the funerary furniture of the tomb, with a comic line written as a dialogue between the two. One tells his fellow, "Isn't it nice what we're doing?" The other answers, "Shut it and let's be done with our work." It's like saying, "You're talking too much." The burial chamber lies many meters under the ground, and that's where Mary Ruka's sarcophagus and members of his family were found. The biggest chamber is where the statue of the deceased was placed, in a big size, welcoming both his spirit and his visitors. On the walls are scenes that describe the funny life his children had, boys and girls, playing with their friends. Many of these games are still played till today in Egypt. Fraser Tombs is a monumental site that lies 5 kilometers northeast of El city. It's composed of a group of rock tombs cut out during the Old Kingdom and in other later periods. They were named after George Willoughby Fraser, who was a British civil engineer. He described the tombs area in the beginning of the 20th century. He was working as a draftsman in the excavations conducted by Sir Flinders Petrie in Fayoum, Bani Hassan and Deir el-Basha. These burial grounds were named Fraser Tombs in his honor. The tombs belong to a 3 kilometers long necropolis of the ancient town of Ta Dahnet or Akoris. The tomb's owners were stewards of the royal estate, and in the 5th dynasty they were priests too. The first tomb is the one that belongs to Nika Ankh. He's represented right at the head of the tomb, together with his wife and his elder son to the right. In another statue, he is presented with his wife and their 3 children. One of the interesting scenes is a chair with a dog underneath. The dog's name is written beside him. He was called Chuki, and that shows the care and love given to animals of history. The offerings holders carry and bring all the offerings needed for the tomb, including a bull. Nika Ankh must have lived long enough to see his grandchildren, for we see him distributing gifts on 12 of them. The most interesting fact about the tomb is that it dates back to 3,000 years BC. The collection of rock-cut tombs in Fraser Hill in Elminia comprises interesting scenes which date to the Old Kingdom. One of them
is the tomb of Ni-Ka-Ankh II, which lies close to the tomb of Ni-Ka-Ankh I and is actually older than the first one, but was left unfinished. Its owner ordered the preparation of the other tomb was actually buried and consecrated this one for his father and mother, whose statues are carved inside. Ni-Ka-Ankh holds in his hand the hieroglyphic symbol called Meri, and it simply means the man with such a big heart didn't forget his elder son, Emeri of Ankh, who is supposed to be the most important child among the others and the right hand of his father. Here, Ni-Ka-Ankh wrote a will to his elder son. The will states that he is going to be the high priest of goddess Hathor in her temple after the death of his father. Then comes the turn of his brothers in the will. The son had to include his 12 siblings in the services of the temple. Each of them should supervise the service 1 month under his main supervision. Ni-Ka-Ankh was himself the high priest of goddess Hathor's temple, meaning that he was performing the duty of the king, who was a high priest of all the temples in Egypt. And since it's practically impossible for him to be at all places all times, he deputized one high priest for each temple. Ni-Ka-Ankh was proud to record that on the walls of his second tomb, for we read here M, which means the royal priest known by Ka-Ankh had immortalized his family in a relatively small tomb. Fraser tombs in Armenia are characterized by a special way of burials unmatched in any other cemetery in Egypt. For example, in the Valley of the Kings, the tomb is either cut out in the rocks under the ground or above the ground. In both cases, the burial shafts exist within the tomb, or the tomb ends with a burial chamber where the sarcophagus of the deceased is placed. Here, in Fraser tombs, the burial shafts are dug out of the tomb. The room of the tomb is merely a chapel where the history of the person's life is inscribed to immortalize him, and where family could come to visit and present their offerings on the offering table, which is placed right in front the false door. That door is for the double of the person or his ka, which lives inside the tomb and is free to go and come as it wants through the false door. Behind the false door lies a burial shaft. In the outdoor openings there used to be a sink, but by time they were exposed. The tomb number 3 in the collection of Fraser tombs belongs to an anonymous man, but it has got a special design. It's the mastaba shape, which prevailed before the Third Dynasty, almost 5,000 years ago. It has got 12 statues that represent him and his family. It's a perfect example of the Fraser tomb style, as there are 2 false doors in the tomb, in front of which are 2 vertical burial shafts, no doubt to fit for the burials of this big number of his family. Every monumental cemetery in Egypt is from another. For in Yemen alone, there are the famous Bani Hassan and Tuna Jabal cemeteries in addition to Fraser tombs. The cemetery is 7 kilometers away from the ruins of this ancient city. One of the most important tombs of Fraser is the tomb of Genuka, who lived during the 4th dynasty in the era of the Old Kingdom. This is one of the biggest tombs in the area and overlooks the fantastic view of the fields, which symbolizes the living world that's connected to the world of the dead, separable only by the mountain. Genuka is the father of Nika Ankh, who is a high priest of goddess Hathor's temple, which is situated in Tehna al-Jabal, known in the Greek period as Akoris. A natural catastrophe happened here in the old times and left a severe effect on the monumental area. It was an earthquake, maybe the one that occurred on the year 27 BC. It had split the tomb horizontally, shifting the lower part away from the upper one. Genuka was lucky that the earthquake hasn't destroyed his tomb completely. It has actually added to its value, making it a sort of a miracle tomb and a special one in the area. It's even interesting to see the scenes and hieroglyphics shifting a bit using the continuity of the lines. There are 4 tombs in Fraser Cemetery to be visited. Each one is different from another and worth visiting. But most of all, it's the magical atmosphere of this fabulous area which attracts the visitors. For here, you can sense that thin invisible line that separates the living from the dead. It's a line crossed by the ka or the double of the deceased any time to be with his living loved ones, and when being fulfilled, return back to its world of darkness, leaving the thread between the two worlds open for always.
هنا فينا على أرضنا وجالنا العالم قال هنا مكاننا من بداية الحياة من كل البلاد بلدنا فيها حجر بينطق تاريخنا ونليش هادي يعيش جوا روحنا هنا بداية